Um, so just briefly, the purpose of tonight is trying to explore the current and most likely SEN kids that you're going to come across within sort of your school and your settings, and the sort of presentations of those students might be within PE, and the barriers and potential challenges that you're going to face with them, and then sort of strategies, how we can adapt, provide alternative provisions in place to try and allow them to still engage and sort of get the best benefits from taking part in PE, really. I'm going to try and include points for opportunities for questions throughout, so I think I've tried to strategically place them at every sort of few slides or so. And if you use sort of the chat feature to pose questions, if you sort of had a question halfway through and sort of think, oh, I'm not going to remember that, just bob it in the chat, and then we can just pick up on it there and sort of discuss it when we get down. Also, no one is an expert, and everyone's still learning. I certainly am. Every day at school is new challenges, new difficulties. So sometimes I might not have the answers, but someone else here tonight might actually have experienced that. So feel free to share your own experiences, and it's a safe space, really, so that please feel free to openly discuss the challenges that you're facing or that you've faced previously, and to try and start the dialogue really about what we're doing. And in an ideal world, I'd like to sort of try and create a little mini series of about SEN if we can, and these sort of talks. And tonight's just obviously our broad stroke introduction, and that sort of next time we'd be able to sort of go into a bit more detail about certain categories of SEN or types of SEN, and how we potentially overcome the challenges that they're facing. So yeah, that's the plan. Let's see if this is going to work. Oh, brill. So I'll quickly just introduce myself. For those of you who don't know, my name's Adam Price. I'm SEN PE teacher, also PSHE coordinator and data coordinator at a lovely school, special school, independent in North Yorkshire, just outside of Thirsk. I've worked there for 8 years now. Initially, I started as a teaching assistant, LSA. Worked my way up through that, started the PE department essentially as it is there now, and I've taken it forward to what it is now. Initially, we only had primary, and then we've only got up Key Stage 2 anyway. We had primary doing PE, and now we have all the way up to Key Stage 5. Every single student has access to PE and qualifications within PE. We do Cambridge National Sports Science, Sports Studies, because we feel they're much more accessible for our types of students. And when we get to A level, we look at the BTEC Sport Level 3, because again, we feel that's sort of more appropriate for the students that we've got at the minute. In terms of delivery, I do Key Stage 2 and 3 core. When we look at doing a global sports curriculum, so we don't just stick to your traditional sports. So we do sports so we do each half term, we do sports from Australasia, and then we move to Asia, and then we move on to sort of Europe, North America, and we sort of essentially travel the globe through sports. So this term, we were meant to have been doing football from North America. We were meant to be doing some Aboriginal sports, and we were meant to be doing sort of korfball and things like that as well. So we try and just go wild with what we do. And the whole point is that I learn at the same time as the students, and it's sort of a real collaborative feel the whole way through. I teach Key Stage 3, PSHE as well, and a bit of Key Stage 4 global perspectives. So in terms of content, we're going to sort of just do a whistle-stop tour through what the SEN code practices and why it matters for us as teachers, really, but really PE teachers. What they categorise as the broad areas of SEN, what the current trends are with SEN and what we're currently facing in terms of presentation and what we're going to be challenged with, the specific needs and barriers that we're going to have within PE curriculum, how we would look at changing our assessment and changing our curriculum, doing an audit and sort of designing it to make it more appropriate for our students to SEN, looking at strategies and adaptations and how you can improve what you're doing in the lessons, but also what you're doing before lessons, pre-planning, curriculum, equipment, that sort of thing. Alternatives, a little bit of sort of quick wins and a food for thought with Q&A right at the end as well. Obviously, as I said, if there's any questions throughout, just bob it in the chat, and there'll be a few points where we'll sort of stop off and sort of chat about what each individual bit is. So to kick us off, SEN Code of Practice. Has everyone heard of the SEN Code of Practice and what it relates to in terms of our teaching and in terms of what we're required to do, really? It's a bit of one of those documents that everyone sort of seems to know it's there and that it exists, but doesn't necessarily have great detail understanding about it, because I think, well, that's not my job. It might be the SEN Code's job, and they're just there to disseminate down the information to us. But there's some really key parts in the SEN Code that I think, if we have time, are worth the read, really, as teachers. So it's our statutory guidance. We don't have a choice about following it. For England, you must know, each devolved government has their own version as such. And it relates to children and young adults, so from 0 to 25, and those with special educational needs. The particular chapter about schools is chapter 6, and the particular annex, which is really important, is our annex section 2. So just to pick out a few key parts within the SEN Code of Practice. The first one involves curriculum, and it obviously says all students, all pupils should have access to a broad and balanced curriculum, no matter what. It's our job as teachers. Here, as teachers, we should use appropriate assessment targets, which are deliberately ambitious. So we can't just float our way through teaching these children. We have to be stretching, and we have to be providing things in a way that they're able to access. Potential areas of difficulty should be identified and addressed at the outset. I know that some schools have a very fixed way of doing their curriculum. They might do a curriculum review now and again. We really consider the SEND students that we've got either coming through or in the school at the moment. Secondly, any SEND intervention, anything that needs to be promoted with SEND, is first and foremost the job of the teachers to try and address that and improve that, to try and level out those areas of weaknesses. Obviously, we've got the SEN Code that will be able to support us with that and be able to give us assessments and be able to show us certain strategies and things that we're able to introduce. But first protocol is us as teachers. We're responsible and accountable for the progress and development of the pupils in our class. We know that. But this just makes it really clear, you know, it's up to us. With our SEN students, the key difference is sometimes those SEN students may be accompanied with another adult if they're supported. And I know that not always, but some teachers sort of feel that that adult's got responsibility there. They know what they're doing. But the buck still lies with the teacher. It's not the teaching assistant or the specialist staff. It's not their responsibility to be accountable for the progress of that child within your lesson. It's you as the teacher. And I think that the most important part, and I'm going to keep coming back to this time and time again, is the EHCP. And the particular part there, it says it is important that teachers, education professionals work closely with a child and a young person and has full knowledge of the child or young person's EHCP. It's bread and butter stuff in many respects that some of us will be very familiar with, some of us not so much, but we need to know the child's EHCP because that's really our passport of what to do with those children and how to work forward with them. So the broad areas of SEND, as the SEND Code of Practice would describe it, are obviously our communication interaction, so their speech and language communication needs. That's where you would have ASD, be a diagnosis, potentially PDA within there, and their difficulty getting thoughts across, so not able to potentially communicate all their thoughts and ideas in a succinct and sort of socially acceptable manner. The lack of understanding of social rules, and obviously that can change over time though, so the more astute they become and the more astute they get at sort of understanding their condition, the better they are at being able to manage themselves and also the social cues and be able to read and understand them more. But some students obviously will never come across that. The second area is our cognition and learning, and that's where we've got our moderate, severe, profound, and multiple learning difficulties, and in specific learning difficulties. Sometimes with PE, certainly where I am, we have some students who have dyspraxia, and that can play a massive part in how we can actually manage them within PE and manage their ability, because they're not able to coordinate and motor control as successfully as other students. So straight away they're on the back foot, just with the specific learning difficulties. Obviously the moderate learning difficulties are sort of learning more at a slow pace. Severe learning difficulties are going to encounter potentially mobility and communication issues. And obviously the PMLD, that's where we've got severe and complex learning difficulties, and going to be a sensory or physical impairment as well. The social and emotional mental health used to be categorized as behavioral, but they've brought it in this way now, and sort of that, well, ADHD fits within that, ADD, attachment disorders, that sort of condition falls under our social and emotional mental health concerns and issues there. And then finally, probably the most obvious ones really, is our sensory and physical needs, the visual impairment, hearing impairment, multisensory impairment, physical disability. Now, in terms of all out numbers, in terms of SEND across the whole, there's 1.27 million SEND students in 2018. That makes up 14.6% of our total number of students either within education, really. Nearly 12% of that is on SEN support, so don't have an EHCP plan, and 250,000 of those have the EHCPs. That's the breakdown of primary type of need. For those who aren't aware of what primary type of need is, that's our overriding factor. So some of our students where we have all of them, apart from two, ASD, their primary need. Other students, there's a few that have SEMH as their primary need, but because of their autistic spectrum disorder condition, that means that they wouldn't necessarily be able to function properly and essentially survive an SEMH setting. So they end up coming to us because that's sort of more appropriate for them. In terms of the actual schools and the situations within that, within primary, you're going to come across potentially about 38% of your primary students are going to have communication difficulties, and this is within state-funded primary schools. Within state-funded secondary schools, 21% are going to have communication difficulties. Not necessarily all statemented or EHCPs, some of them just on SEN support. In terms of our cognition and learning, primary you're going to come across 31%, secondary 43%. There's a massive jump there within secondary for the cognition and learning. SEMH is pretty much the same between primary and secondary. You've got about 15 to 16% for both. And in terms of our sensory and physical needs, again, that accounts for about 6% of the SEN that we're going to come across within primary and secondary and state-funded sector. And obviously that's just a breakdown there. The key point with your cognition and learning is that there's a massive jump and a massive spike within our specific learning difficulties. So think about the amount of presentation that gets found for dyslexia, dyspraxia and dyscalculia within a secondary setting that wasn't necessarily a massive issue within primary, then all of a sudden becomes front and center in terms of what they're looking at. So that's why you have a massive spike. I think it goes from like 10% all the way up to 20%, so you got a massive spike there. So I want you to have a quick think about, is the state of that reflective of the school or the setting that you're in? Are you seeing a growing number of students who have communication difficulties? Are you seeing a growing number of sensory and physical needs, or are they few and far between? Are our moderate learning difficulties posing a considerable issue within our lessons? And where do those needs fit in within the total picture of our school? You know, as I said, my school is majority communication difficulties, whereas other schools might have a higher profile of cognition and learning. So it'll be interesting, just briefly, to get a couple of thoughts about what your particular setting is, and what the challenges are that you face. What are the biggest challenges you're facing with these students? Are people happy for me to pick them at random to go and have a little speak about what students they've got? I take the silence as a consent. Let's go for Joe. Your mic's on.
Okay. We've got an increasing number, as I expect everybody has, and right across all the range of needs, to be honest. Year 9 in particular for us is particularly needs heavy cohort, but quite diverse. So we've got a full range, Down syndrome. We've got quite a few severe cerebral palsy children. And then lower down the school, year 7, our intake this year was very ASD and communication, language communication heavy, and a few more quite severe physical needs as well. So chair or frame bound. So that's having quite a big impact on us as a PE department, and also we're quite a rural school, but we're set in very old buildings. So that presents quite a few issues, just being able to access changing rooms and things.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially like you said with the wheelchairs, that's going to be a massive difficulty if you're quite a fixed building really, and no potential expansion of, you know, what the room you've got.
Yeah, I mean, we're due a rebuild, which should have started, but obviously it hasn't now. But that's going to take a couple of years, so it's not an immediate solution. So yeah, it's something we've got to work around for the next couple of years.
Yeah. Sam, you said that obviously all your kids are SEMH, potentially in the process of gaining EHCPs. Crewe, difficult place potentially to work, and obviously PMLD daughter. So that'll obviously pose its own challenges at home as well, and give you your own sort of unique experiences, I guess, where you're not necessarily potentially focused on education. Don't worry about it, Val. He just said he can't unmute. He's got too much going on, in case anyone didn't see. So obviously that'll pose your own challenges over within the home setting, won't it? But it'll give you a unique understanding of, you know, what people are facing within education, sort of come from your P background as well. Vic, I'm going to unmute you if that's okay. Go for it.
I actually work across about 60 schools, so I still run an old school sports partnership, and we very much deal with key stage EYFS, key stage 1 up to key stage 5, and we're seeing a huge kind of turn in the pupils that we're having to kind of enrich through our PE curriculum. And for me, this is just getting ideas on how mainly we can support those in mainstream settings, not just in our special schools as well. So we're seeing a real diverse of students, from wheelchair users to, you know, just I'm based in an all boys secondary school, so that's a challenge as well. And just how can we engage those within our SEN departments to be fully inclusive in our PE lessons?
Well, that's really quite interesting, sort of where you're coming from as well, in terms of working across lots of different schools. And I suppose it's a case of magpieing, isn't it, a lot of the time, and looking at the best practice from other people and going, oh, well, that's worked there. Let's experiment and try that here. And I suppose we talk about it as having a bit of a Swiss Army knife effect with your curriculum and with your teaching, that you're able to pull out multiple tools to try them out, and eventually you'll be able to find the right one. And there's never one size fits all, unfortunately. But it's a case of, you know, if you keep going, you keep trying, you'll eventually find one that goes, that worked for them, but that worked for them on this day. And then you'll come back to it tomorrow and you'll try it out and be like, oh God, well, that didn't work again, did it? You know, what went wrong there? What was different? That sounds really quite challenging, you know, from that perspective of trying to get everyone engaged and involved, really. Who is user? I'm going to have to get your name as well. It just says user. You've got like flowers behind your head. Lady, dark hair. No. Okay. Anthony, go for it, mate. What's your place like? Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can do, pal.
Right, I'm sorry. I've put the headphones on, kids around and whatnot, but I clearly the mic wasn't working on them. Probably similar to what Vic was just saying, I work across several schools, so I do advisory work across a county. So really my role is supporting schools in engaging mainstream schools primarily in engaging all of their learners in high quality physical education, physical activity, etc. And I think for me, it interests me the content that you were delivering today from someone who is in that setting because of my exposure as a primary school practitioner. I was in school teaching for 11 years in a primary school, and the array of needs that were there in those settings and the children that I worked with was a continual challenge to, as kind of Vic touched on, to ensure that these children were being supported in the best way possible. And physical education, I think I always saw as one of those areas that actually most practitioners would challenge even more so than in other subject areas. So, there's lots of stuff that I came across that, when we look at the holistic models of how we engage learners across, the cognitive kind of areas, the kind of affective side of it, not just the physical, the psychomotor aspects of it. For me, that's kind of the interest where I am really, how we engage learners wholly.
I think that's completely true of a lot of settings. The traditional P model is just activity, physical, skill based, and there's more and more about this holistic approach to PE because its benefits are so much more wide scope than just you're going to get healthy, you're going to get fit, you're going to be able to kick a ball X amount of distance. There's so much more that it can offer beyond just those things. We'll come on to that in a bit because I've got a bit about sort of what I do with assessment really and how we explore that. So we'll move on there for now. But thanks for engaging that. We'll come back to the others that we didn't get chat with then.